Storytelling, how to use a pocket story. Today, I'm going to talk about how I accidentally dragged a teenager behind a van, and I want to use this as a pocket story and teach you how to use this. So sometimes people come to me and they're just working on major presentations. Other times they're just working on their social skills, and other times they're working on just their career advancement. So all kinds of different ways that public speaking shows up. Public speaking is an advantage, shows up in every single area of your life. But when you know a pocket story, when you have a something that you can just share out of the pocket, pull it out of your pocket and share it, and it's relevant, it is fun, it's a huge way to connect, it's a huge way to show up, it's a huge way to show off part of your life, it's a huge way to entertain for your audience. It's super helpful. So I'm going to model one of these for you. I'm going to unpack it as I go along, and then I'm going to tell you 5 different tips on how you can have a pocket story. So how do you do a pocket story? How do you have a story ready to go into any environment, and that you just have people who are there with you? That's what we're going to talk about here today. So first of all, let me go ahead and model a story. So pretend we're at some kind of social setting. It might be a restaurant, it might be a bar, it might be a church environment, it might be in a small group, it might be on the soccer field, a whole bunch of parents who are talking with each other in different setting like this. And so I'm looking for those kind of scenarios where others are participating. It's lively, so it's not just talking about the weather, that kind of thing. And that people are participating, and I can participate too. And that's what you can do. You can have one of these ready for you, and you can share it. So mine starts off. Mine that I'm going to share today is one of my bigger ones, and I can scale this longer and shorter depending on the situation. So I might have a segue, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And in the segue, I might go, yeah, I absolutely love getaways. Although you got to be careful on a getaway because you never know what stupid thing you might end up doing, like the time that I dragged a teenager behind a van. So there's my little hook that I'm using right there, my segue, then my hook gets people interested, and they go, wait, what did you do? And I go, okay, well, so, and then here's the pocket story. I go, okay, so I was at this camp when I was about 21 years old, and one of the drivers for the vans on the way back to the church was unable to drive. And so they asked me, I was one of the youth leaders, and they asked me, and I was like, oh, that's super cool. I get to be an official adult. I'm 20 years old. I get to be an official adult, and this is going to be so cool. Yeah, I was also super cautious because I only had one contact in that day. And so I was like, oh, I gotta be super cautious, super responsible. But when it was announced I was gonna be driving a van, all these teenagers rushed because I was the fun guy. And for the next 3 hours back, I absolutely did not live up to their expectations of having a fun trip. And they were just absolutely saddened that I had the 2 and 10 position, and I was focused the whole time and telling them to be quiet. Now, as we got closer to the church, they were just really harassing me and harassing me and harassing me about, hey, come on, we got to do something fun, like at least a Chinese fire drill. And so I was up to it. I was like, all right. And so in my mind, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna show them a fun time. So we're 3 blocks away from the church, and I'm like, okay, I never did a Chinese fire drill, but okay, I'll do one right here. So I pull over into the left turning lanes, not the side quiet road, turning lane on a road that's 25 miles an hour, but it actually goes up to a lot of times the traffic 40, 45 miles per hour. It's right in front of the fire station, and it's a major thoroughfare in the town that I grew up in. And so I open my door, I put it in park, and I say, Chinese fire drill, and I hop out. Now, this is a 15-passenger van, so people are crawling over each other to get out, and they're literally spilling into the road. They're kind of falling onto the concrete, and then we're just running around the van, and we're like bumping into each other. And so I jump back in the driver's seat, and I close my door, and I throw it into drive. And because I'm in the van, everyone else is in the van too, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, the car ahead of me had already gone, and it was a green light. And so I start actually driving, and kids are diving into the side doors of the van, just diving headlong into it on top of each other. And they start yelling at me, Mike. And finally, as I'm already into the intersection, finally the words that they were yelling me about, saying my name for, finally came through. Mike, we're dragging Laura. And I stop, and I look back, and sure enough, there's this chaos behind me. And there's this teenage girl who's grabbing onto the side door with one arm and a look of terror in her eyes. I pause. She gets back in. Now, I know what you're saying. Like that's awful, but at the same time, I mean, realistically, most people would have just grabbed both doors by their hands and then like boom, pull themselves in. Had I not been dragging Laura, The girl with one arm. Yeah, yeah. Okay. There's the pocket story, right? Now, obviously, I can tone this up and I can tone this down. So let me unpack a little bit of what's going on here. First of all, I want you to be aware of having a segue. So a pocket story is a very powerful way for you to grab a hold of people's attention, but you need to have different segues so that it's not so random that you're all of a sudden telling a story. So the segue is like, oh, you'll never would have imagined what happened to me one time, or oh, that reminds me of my childhood, or something like that. And so you can find some natural segues. By the way, comedians have these, and we'll come back to comedians here in a moment. Comedians have these for different bits of their show. Then the second thing that you want to know is you want to know a hook. What is it that's going to cause people to be interested in what you're saying? Oh, yeah. That reminds me of the time that I dragged a teenager behind a church van. It's like, wait, what? You did what? That sounds so stupid. Tell me more. Now, this could be something like, it reminds me of the time where I failed my first promotional interview. Okay. That reminds me of the time where this happened. So some kind of hook that makes people go, I'm interested. By the way, at this point in time, I can have all kinds of stories and just pop them up into a conversation. But for a lot of people, pocket stories are something that I train them on so that they can have something to pull out, so they can be socially active and entertaining. And if you think about it, comedians do this all the time, and they're great at entertaining people and engaging people. So why can't we use this? So you want to have a segue, you want to have a hook, then you want to know the flow. Now, this whole story of dragging the teenager behind the van, I can tell in just 1 minute. I could tell it in 3 minutes, like I did here. I can tell it in 10 minutes. And there's all kinds of different elements. Now, the idea of knowing the flow is knowing what basic movements go one after another. So one basic movement is I'm at camp and I wanted to look responsible. And I'm normally fun, but here I'm not fun. Super responsible. See that movement there? I can fill it in with more details or less details. By the way, knowing the flow is important in any presentation. Don't memorize the points, know the flow. I'll talk about that some other point in time on another live stream. But you want to know the flow of your story. What happened? What happened? What happened? Big movements, not small particular minutia. Movements over minutia. So after that, it goes into, I don't want to be boring. I'm going to do a Chinese fire drill, the chaos of it, and then dragging Laura and her pulling herself back up. And sometimes people ask more questions along the way, right? That's how a story could be. If you intrigue them much, then they'll want to know more. I always tell people this: if you do well with less, people will want more. And it's a huge aspect of even your stories. Go smaller on the story, so people will want more, and then you can fill in the details if they want and if you want. And you might not want to when you do it good. Okay, so you want to know segue, you want to know a hook, you want to know the flow, you want to know how it works together. Don't worry if you miss something out. Oh, yeah, we actually stopped at Starbucks along the way. Who cares about that kind of stuff? Don't worry about the small minutia along the way. Just keep on moving on. Now, you want to use emotion and you want to use energy, and you want to match energy to the environment. Now, normally a pocket story is used for some kind of social gathering. So you're kind of reading, oh, yeah, that one time. Oh, yeah, there's big energy. You're going bigger. It's less energy. Like, yeah, absolutely. I understand that. Me too. One time. And then you go into your pocket story. So you want to use emotion and you want to match energy. Using emotion is really where you're saying, like, oh, I was so excited. Oh, I can't believe I dragged Laura. I was so embarrassed by this. And then even while you're using emotion and having relevant energy, you do want to be careful of exaggeration, because exaggeration can kill a story. Yeah, I mean, people were going like 90 miles an hour around me. No, they weren't. No one's going to believe that. I mean, absolutely stupid. I was like, and 20 kids. No, 20 kids were not in the van. It was a 15-passenger van and it was full. So tell the truth, you can go a little hyperbolic, a little bit bigger. People were going about 50 miles an hour around us. And the reason why we use hyperbole in the story is to make it feel like it felt when you were in the moment. Like one time I was on a freeway and I spun around multiple times. Well, the reality is I spun around like 3/4 of the time. But in telling that story, spinning around multiple times, you feel what I felt with the 3/4 spin on the freeway. So hyperbole allows people to listen to the same intensity that you felt. And often if you just tell exactly as it is, then it doesn't feel as big as it felt to you. So be careful of exaggeration. And then the final part is this: test it out like a comedian. So a great pocket story you can use in all kinds of different environments. This is true of any public speaking. Practice your presentation. Your first public should never be the people you're delivering the talk to. So you want to make sure that you are testing things out with the fake audience before you deliver them to the real audience. And the first person you should test out to is yourself. Does it flow well? Does it run well? In fact, I did one of these tests earlier before I went live with it. And if this is a big presentation like I'm doing next week or a couple weeks, then I'm going to test it out a whole bunch. I'm going to practice a whole bunch. I'm going to practice it for other people. But you always want to test it out. Comedians test out their material before they go into one of their Netflix lives. So you want to test out your material. So how do you grab a hold of people's attention in a social setting? You can use a pocket story. What are some elements of a pocket story? A segue from conversation into your story, a hook that makes them go, what? Really? Well, tell me more about that. Then you want to know the flow. So think movements, not minutia. And then you want to use emotion and matching energy to the different situations. Finally, be careful of exaggeration and ultimately make sure you're testing this out in different environments. All right, go create a pocket story and start testing it out, and then go ahead and deliver it live. Hey, thank you so much for being part of the live stream and these short little bits that I've been doing on a daily basis. I know that a lot of people have sent me some notes about how it's encouraging and helpful to them. Feel free to shoot me a note of what would be helpful to you. Until next time, thank you so much.